This is a chariot, about 100 feet of solid stone, carved to look like it's racing across the sand. And for 7 centuries, its wheels have done something no ordinary carving can do. They tell the time, real time, traced by the shadow of the sun. But here's the strange part. The god this chariot was built to carry is gone. The main idol vanished, and to this day, it has never been found. The tower that once rose 200 feet above the shore, it collapsed, every last stone of it. And after more than a century of study, historians still cannot agree on why. Was it an army, an earthquake, the sea? Or was it the strangest theory of all? A giant magnet hidden at the summit, said to make a god float in the air and drag passing ships to their doom. This is Konark, the temple sailors called the Black Pagoda. Stay with me, and we'll separate the legend from what the stones actually remember. On the coast of Odisha in eastern India, where the Bay of Bengal meets the shore, there is a temple that pretended to be a vehicle, not a building with a chariot inside it. The building is the chariot. It was raised around the year 1250 by a king named Narasimhadeva I, a ruler of the Eastern Ganga dynasty at the peak of its power. He dedicated it to Surya, the sun god. And in Hindu tradition, Surya crosses the sky each day in a blazing chariot pulled by 7 horses. So the king didn't simply build a house for the god. He built the god's own chariot, full size, in stone, and set it at the edge of the world, facing the sunrise. 24 wheels, 7 horses, a tower tall enough to be seen from far out at sea. They even named the region Arkakshetra, the land of the sun. But the most ingenious part of this chariot wasn't its size. It was hidden in the wheels. Look closely at one of the great wheels, and you'll count 16 spokes, 8 wide, 8 thin, and a rim carved with rows of tiny beads. This is not decoration. It's a clock. As the sun moves, a spoke, or a small peg at the center, casts a shadow across the face of the wheel. Read where that shadow falls, and you can read the hour. The 8 wide spokes divide the day into 8 watches, about 3 hours each. The thin spokes cut those in half, and the beads along the rim can mark the minutes in between. A wheel of stone, carved 700 years before the digital age, working as a sundial you can still read today. There are 24 of these wheels in all, 12 on each side of the chariot. Some say they count the 24 hours of a day, others the 12 months of the year twice over. And whichever reading is true, one fact stands. The people who built this understood the sun well enough to catch it in stone. So who were they? And why pour a lifetime into a single temple? The temple was the vision of one man's ambition. Narasimhadev I ruled a kingdom that had just done the near impossible. It had held back the armies of the Delhi Sultanate at a time when much of northern India was falling. Historians believe Konark was, in part, a victory monument, a king carving his triumph into the coastline for the gods and for everyone else to see. And it shows. Because for a sacred temple, Konark is strikingly worldly. Its walls are covered not only with gods, but with the life of a king. Royal hunts, marching armies, elephants and processions, a ruler inspecting his court, a ruler at prayer. One scholar called it the dazzling dream of an ambitious and mighty king. A man who wanted to be remembered as both a devotee and a conqueror. To build that dream, he would need an army of a different kind. 1,200 artisans, 12 years of labor, and, according to legend, one problem that none of them could solve. The stone itself had to travel. Konark's builders worked in 3 stones: condylite, chlorite, and laterite, and not one of them came from nearby. Every block was hauled across long distances, lifted with ramps and rollers and timber wheels, then fitted so tightly that the joints all but vanish. For 12 years, 1,200 workers gave their lives to it, and leading them, tradition says, was a master builder named Bishu Maharana. Then comes the legend. As the temple neared completion, the builders faced a final, impossible task: setting the crowning stone at the very top of the tower. Again and again, they failed. And the king had given them a deadline, on pain of death. Then a boy stepped forward. Dharmapada, the master builder's own son, just 12 years old. He had studied the ancient books of architecture, but had never built a thing. And the boy solved it. He found the way to set the final stone. But the story does not end in celebration. Fearing the king's men would punish 1,200 masters for being outdone by a child, the boy is said to have climbed the temple he had just completed and thrown himself into the sea below. There is no hard proof it ever happened. But in Odisha, the tale of Dharmapada has been told for centuries. The price, they say, of perfection. If the wheels are Konark's mind, its carvings are its soul. Almost every surface breathes. Celestial dancers, musicians frozen mid-beat, lions rearing over elephants, and scene after scene of ordinary life. Lovers, travelers, animals, warriors. Among them are the famous erotic carvings, intimate couples sculpted openly into a holy temple. To modern eyes, they can be a shock. But in the world that made them, desire, kama, was one of the recognized aims of a full human life, woven into a temple that celebrated creation itself. And then there is Surya himself. A surviving image of the sun god stands more than 11 feet tall, cut from a single block of green chlorite. He holds 2 lotus flowers. A halo of carved flame rings his head, and on his feet he wears boots. Boots on an Indian god. It's a fingerprint of something remarkable, an influence that traveled all the way from Central Asia and Persia, carried along the ancient roads of sun worship, and left here in stone on the coast of Odisha. But the greatest image of all, the main deity, the one this entire chariot was built to carry, is missing. And that absence is the beginning of Konark's darkest chapter. For centuries, sailors on the Bay of Bengal steered by two temples on the Odisha coast. One, at Puri, they called the White Pagoda, bright with lime plaster. The other, at Konark, they called the Black Pagoda, dark, looming, and, they whispered, dangerous. Because of the legend of the magnet. The story goes that at the very summit of the tower sat a colossal lodestone, a natural magnet so powerful it held the entire iron-bound structure together, and more, that its pull suspended the metal idol of Surya in mid-air, so the god appeared to float, touching nothing. But that same magnet, they said, carried a curse. As ships passed the coast, it dragged at their iron nails and fittings, pulling vessels off course and onto the rocks. And so, the tale claims, foreign sailors slipped into the temple and tore the great stone out. And when they did, the balance broke, and the tower began to fall. It is a haunting story. It is also, as far as history can tell, not true. No record of such a lodestone has ever been found. No wreck, no account, no stone. It belongs to legend, not to evidence. But legends grow for a reason, and behind this one lies a real mystery that has never been solved. What actually brought Konark down? Here is what we know for certain. The temple was finished. We have an inscription from the year 1384 confirming Konark was complete and alive with worship. 2 centuries later, the Mughal record still describes it as a prosperous wonder that left visitors astonished. And yet, somewhere in the years that followed, it died. The theories are many, and each one has a problem. Some blame the invader Dharmapada, said to have struck the temple around 1568 and dislodged a keystone. But records show Konark still standing, still admired after that date. Others blame the earth itself, a soft, sandy foundation, too weak for so vast a tower. Or the stone, a flaw-prone rock that simply weathered away. Or the salt sea air, quietly eating the iron clamps that held the whole thing together. What we can say is this: the great tower did not fall in a single night. It came down slowly, over generations. Travelers in the 1800s still saw a broken piece of it standing, until in 1848 the last fragment finally gave way. And the idol, the presiding god of the sun, gone. By tradition, carried away to Puri for safekeeping, but never confirmed, never found. A temple built to hold the sun had lost both its god and its crown, and for a while the world simply let it disappear. By the 1800s, Konark had become a ruin, swallowed by forest and sand, its fallen stones carried off for other buildings, its sculptures stripped away. And then, to save it, the rescuers did something extraordinary. In 1903, British engineers faced a terrifying problem. The one great hall still standing, the Jaga Mohana, was hollow, cracked, and ready to collapse. So they filled it completely. They packed the entire interior with sand, sealed the doorways, and turned the hall into a solid, silent mountain of stone, buried from the inside, to stop it from falling. It worked. For more than 100 years, that hidden core of sand held Konark's last great chamber upright. And here is the remarkable part. That sand is still in there. Only recently, in 2022, more than a century later, did engineers finally begin the delicate work of taking it out. Drilling with almost no vibration, watching the ancient walls in real time, hoping to strengthen the hall at last, without bringing down the very thing they spent a century protecting. So what remains of the great chariot today? And why does the whole world still come to see it? Today, the main tower is gone. The god is missing. And still, Konark is one of the most celebrated monuments on Earth. In 1984, UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site, calling it the culmination of centuries of temple building and a masterpiece of human genius. Its great wheel has become a symbol of India itself. It turns on the country's 10 rupee note, and in 2023, when India welcomed the leaders of the world's largest economies, it was a towering replica of the Konark wheel that stood behind them, the ancient wheel of time, chosen to represent a nation's future. The poet Rabindranath Tagore stood before these ruins and said it best. Here, the language of stone surpasses the language of man, because that is what Konark truly is. Not a perfect temple, a broken one, a chariot with no god and no crown, half swallowed by time. And yet, it still races across that shore, its wheels still turning with the sun, still telling the hours to anyone who stops to read them. The king who built it wanted to be remembered forever. 700 years later, we're still saying his name. If the mystery of Konark held you, there are more like it all along this coast. Temples that hide astronomy, engineering, and secrets we're only beginning to read. Subscribe and we'll keep uncovering them, one stone at a time.